The ultimate guide to the infected Broodmother, everything you need to know about taking it on, all the rewards that you get and all the secret hidden stats that you need to know to succeed in what is now the toughest boss fight, maybe not just in Grounded, but anything I've ever faced. I'm going to rattle off quickly how to unlock it, but most of you guys will probably have worked it out now as I'm slightly late to the party, so I decided to make an in-depth guide for you. Let's go, Infected Broodmother fight. Warning, you will not be able to do this boss fight until you've defeated all of the others. You need Was Queen parts, Broodmother parts and Mantis parts. The doorway will be blocked near the hole near the haze laboratory entrance, that's where you can find it in the flagstones, and you need to turn off the haze. You'll also need to gain access to Mordok's castle laboratory, as that's the recipe for the summon food. And you will also need some toenails. Quick tip, make sure you go ahead and duplicate a bunch of these at the super duper, as it only costs 1000 raw science, much cheaper, quicker and easier than taking on the boss multiple times unless you've already got the parts. With the haze plugged up, you'll find it inside a trench here, and you'll now be able to gain access. I advise building a small outpost for a number of reasons, which I'll explain, to keep you safe right by the entrance. As you make your way through the tunnel, there'll be a bunch of fungal growth. Either take them out and stop them exploding, but be warned they will grow back after a few days. Go ahead and place the hoagie inside and you will summon the infected Broodmother. It has 3 stages. The first stage is remarkably easy, given that I'd read so much while I was away on holiday about it from you guys as well, telling me it was super difficult. I was kind of wondering if you were all just maybe having a bit of a joke, but it does have 3 phases and it gets increasingly harder with each phase. So basic tips and things you need to know. It's weak against fresh. It's only got a 25% resistance to anything with fresh on it. It's got 50% resistance to salty and 75% resistance to spicy. It does have a 90% resistance to poison, which almost makes it not really worth utilising, but there are some exceptions to this. And it's got a 60% resistance to bleed effect too. Completely immune to venom, gas as well. She'll also heal from any explosive damage that she does herself or that you trigger. If you're a master at perfect parrying, you can get away with using just a 2-handed weapon, obviously something that's going to give you lots of fresh damage, and by exception, the best bet at the moment seems to be the Scythe of the Mantis. You could also try unarmed again if your perfect blocking is on point, otherwise one-handed and shield is the way to go. Shout out to Sean, the master data miner, who's provided a bunch of details which I will leave in the comment section. The damage type she deals is stabbing, so that means you're going to need the spicy safety mutation at very least. I think it's definitely one of the ones that you should have. And while corporate kickback can only replenish your health 5% at a time when you block, it's still worth having, I think, especially for the 3rd stage. If it kicks in, it's an absolute lifesaver. The rest of the mutations are always going to be about your build and your personal preference, but I will give some more details about what I use later. There are so many different attacks with the infected Broodmother, so I'm going to list the most important ones and some of the stats, but do remember things may change for balance in the future. In phase 1, she's got relatively simple attacks to avoid though. She doesn't have any kind of gas attack, which you'll start seeing in stage 2 and 3, and she pretty much acts like the Broodmother or a Black Widow. That venom attack, that's similar to the Black Widow, reduces your health by 10 damage every 2 seconds for 10 seconds, and it bypasses Mithridism, so don't bother using that. There are 3 trinkets that you might want to have, and I recommend for the first phase using the fresh trinket. You do want to see if you can get hold of the shield solidifier as well as the fungal growth charms for stage 2 and 3. The one attack that you absolutely must protect yourself against is a fast flurry, as this does a permanent debuff for the duration of the fight. She managed to hit me 11 times in that first phase. Each one of these hits means that I'm going to take 2% less healing from anything that I use, so now I'm 22% down on any of my smoothies or bandages or anything else. This will only clear once the fight has done, and it can stack indefinitely. It gets even worse in phase 2 and 3 with more debuffs that can permanently stack. In phase 2 she's gone from 2000 health to now 3000, and her stun resistance has increased massively, so don't bother using any stun weapons or any perks or buffs that apply it. Buffs and stats can change dramatically in updates, so don't lean too heavily into all of the stats, but just note that she'll start taking even more healing from any explosions. The one saving grace is she'll take 10% more damage now in phase 2. So the big differences in phase 2 are her gas attack as well as starting to throw explosions or mines, and she lays a pretty devastating egg that heals her more moderately too. When she dodges backwards, she'll now release a cloud of gas. It lasts around 10 seconds at the moment, and it will add more of the reduction in healing you receive by 50%, but thankfully only for 20 seconds, and it will also reduce your movement speed by 25% for each tick that you're in the cloud. That screen is your signal that she's about to do a meteor attack, so you might want to either get away from her or make sure you've got your shield up. The important thing with this is to block the screen, as that also applies the permanent debuff of healing received. You don't need to perfect block it, as long as you've got your shield up it should do enough protection. The mines that she's thrown out will detonate a few seconds later, and these of course will all do quite large amounts of damage. But in phase 1 and 2 you really do need to reduce how many of them debuffs she hits you with that permanently stack. The meteor attack will also reduce your attack damage by 50% for 30 seconds. So learning when to block the screen and to get out of the way of the gas is pretty crucial to this fight. You'll notice she's laid a special egg. This egg is also going to give her a massive health boost. Now you can destroy it in 4 hits usually with most weapons, but it does still explode, so it's definitely worth taking out if you're close by, otherwise you may have to just leave it be, let it heal up and try again. The egg will do massive damage but also apply a new permanent debuff that reduces your resistance. So honestly, just avoid it. Don't try and take in on the egg. Let her heal up if you have to for a few seconds, and just actually move away and she'll pretty much chase you and get out the radius of the explosion hopefully. In phase 1 it was a straight up power attack that applied the venom. In phase 2 and 3 it's a side attack that you'll signify this is about to hit. She'll basically jump to the side and you know then it's time to block, hopefully to avoid it. And lastly, her lunge attack also does a exhaustion debuff that is increased by 50% for 20 seconds. I found it was definitely better to switch over from your fresh trinket to either the explosive reduction, i.e. the fungal growth, or if you're feeling particularly brave you might even want to switch your headpiece armour to a upgraded sleep path gas mask, as that also gives reduction in explosive damage. The best techniques are to absolutely block anytime you can't see her. A gas blocking your way, she's moved outwards, make sure you've got your shield up. Hopefully you've not gained too many of the negative healing buffs and you're ready for stage 3, which is absolutely the toughest and the one that I found the most hardest. Obviously, pretty much everything has now been increased. Her attack speed by 50%, movement speed again, and idle time by 1.5. She's gained another 500 stun threshold. She hits 25% harder with her regular attacks. And believe it or not, she increases her health by another 3,000, should mean a 6,000 total, although to be honest it could be only 5,000, the original 2,000 plus another 3. Again though, she will take 10% extra damage now. So you really need to get to the 3rd stage with as little of the defense down and the health down debuffs as possible to stand any kind of chance against her. You also need to have at least some of the trinkets I've been mentioning, and it's preference whether or not you're confident in dodging the bombs in phase 3, because they can do massive amounts of damage, or making sure that you do have something to negate them. The shield solidify is best because it is going to give you that extra defense which you'll need, as the ferocious attacks are just unrelenting, but I found I preferred using the fungal growth because I was dying more to explosions. There are so many more stats, numbers and buffs I could go through after reading through Sean's great work, but honestly she's just tough as nails and she's going to rip you apart unless you've got absolutely max weapons and armour. She does gain a couple of new attacks. She'll fire a direct missile at you with an infection, as well as summoning 2 infected gnats that will also explode pretty much after dying almost instantaneously. All of her flurry attacks have a chance now of giving you the healing debuff, and each one of the mines or the bombs exploding also gives you the resistance damage debuff. So while you see the unedited final fight that I had, the 27th attempt, I'm going to rattle off some other crucial things you might need to know. Smoothies. These buffs obviously stay and last no matter what for 14 minutes, so you can drink every smoothie in the game and you'll get pretty much every benefit of it. It's crazy that nearly 2.5 years I didn't realise this. I must have read somewhere about food not stacking with each other and assumed that was always the same case with smoothies. So shout out to Livestream for that nugget of info. Key ones you want to have are human food to help give you a buff and damage resistance, liquid rage so that you do more damage, green machine and a boost juice for the stamina boosting properties. And it's quite expensive, naturally, the boss sauce that you need a lot of the boss parts to make, but if you have got a big stack, I would certainly try using some of these to get more critical hits in. Make all of these smoothies out of the gum to last longer. The one that you want to have with the muscle sprouts is Fuzz on the Rocks, as that's going to give you your max healing. Shout out to WE in stream for giving me this top tip as well. Change your combat radial and your mutation radial to make sure that you've got smoothies in hot pouch 1 and 2. The infected Broodmother moves so quick it can really be challenging trying to use smoothies using a control pad, so definitely do this using a control pad. It makes it much easier pressing left and right on the D-pad to use a smoothie quickly. Also, you might want to turn up a little bit your turning radius in the options as well, the speed, especially on controlled, as I said, as she just moves way too quick and you'll find that she's behind or outside of you before you can really do anything. When it comes to meals, you want Spider Slider and Black Ox Burgers. Eat the Black Ox Burger first, then the Spider Slider, and you'll actually gain the benefits from both. Normally food knocks out the buff from the other, but apparently these ones stack. Again, live stream taught me this. Avoid heal bassers and bandages. Although they can heal you greatly, especially the heal bassers, obviously, it's still far too long sometimes to use, again unless you're really good at using them in hotkey. You can see I've got 20 debuffs of the re-healing, so that means 40% of anything I'm using to heal is pretty much useless. At the moment, if you was hoping you'd get an infected buff from any of your trophies to give you some extra damage, well actually that is not working currently. It might be a glitch or something going wrong with just this, or maybe it's always been unintended, but that won't actually work at the moment. Again, apparently if you click on any infected trophy, that usually gives you a buff against all infected. So 10 hours of recording, 4 hours of them being live stream, and I finally defeated her. Be careful during her phases though when she's apparently dead, as she can often keep hitting even though you've seemingly reduced her health all the way down to 0, and any mines that haven't exploded can also still be set off. So let's start talking about the armors and weapons and differences and why you should be using certain things. Infection is really good. It's one thing that bypasses and basically reduces her resistance so that you do more damage. The Fire Ant armor is perfect for this, as is the Fire Ant shield. Because poison isn't as effective, it's not really worth going with a poison build. The exception being that if you've got the poison Nova Cloud, at least it is doing some residual damage, even if it's tiny over time. And now that's amplified by having the extra Broodmother armor pieces, it might be worth considering, especially with the Black Widow dagger, as that can often be used pretty fast, especially when you've got it in fresh. But that's one of the most obvious tips. Make sure you've got fresh equipped on whatever weapon you're using. Two-handed weapons are simply just not going to be doing good enough in terms of blocking, especially phase 3, you'll find that you are just getting done over. The exception could be the Scythe, as that has obviously got more damage properties, but I still found it pretty tough to make sure I was blocking enough. Possibly using it with roly-poly armor in bulky might be the best way to go. But to me this fight is designed with a shield and one-handed weapon, namely a sword, dagger, or possibly the tier 3 axe, as long as you've got chopper mutation on it. But infection does need to be used in some way or form. I tried the tick Mahani a bunch of times thinking I'd be able to steal health, and I even tried a few various builds using the ladybug armor, but they just simply weren't giving me enough damage output or helping towards the third final stage. Because she's resistant to bleed, the mantis armor wasn't really doing it for me either, and I feel like it's too light to really give enough resistance, especially with explosions and stuff going off constantly. But I did really try making this video that I was going to do 5 builds that you could take her on with, and literally it was only the one build that was ever successful. Goes without saying, everything should be max upgraded. The Fire Ant shield you use over the Ladybug because of that extra resistance or taking her resistance down. But you could go ahead and use the Rusty Spear as opposed to the Scimitar. It does have that more range, but I would say its master ability once you've got the mutation for the Javelineer isn't as good, as you have to hold it to really utilise it. Whereas using a blade, you're going to help reduce or take down resistances again. And if you've got Blade Master upgraded to level 3, you're also going to reduce your exhaustion time by 90% as well. Critical hit mutations are definitely something you should consider, obviously especially if you are trying a two-handed build, and likely the Mantis armor set. Coupe de Grace and Fully Yoked definitely should be something you can consider. And I personally still like old favourites like Meat Shield, as well as maybe the Stamina extension too. With the Rascal Rogue and the Loot Luck, you can go ahead and steal pieces from her, but you only really get the chunks, you won't necessarily get Venom or Fangs. Not by stealing anyway. And yeah, once again iterating the shield solidifier and stuff like that, make sure you've got equipped in your hotbars so you can switch in between. Ideally you want to be healing when she's just about to do her meteor attack, or she's obviously far away from you. As soon as she screams, that's a good time to also heal, and when she's just pounced on you. But as you can see, she often does that side jump quickly afterwards, or another lunge. So recognise when she's about to scream so that you can be blocking, and obviously try and avoid her flurry attacks at all costs. It is important to try and get some perfect parries in when you can get more confident with it, as this will reduce the load on your shield and stop you from being stunned. I actually got further than I'd got before, but maybe that was because of the experience in fighting her so many times using the Koi armor set. It did seemingly slow it down with the Dazzling Riposte, which is meant to just increase your window so that you can perfect block. But yeah, that's what it seemed to do, it actually slowed down slightly some of the animations, especially in phase 3. The bulky path rather than the sleek, as the parry stun just wasn't going to do the job given how offensive she is against stun. But this is obviously a much early game armor, it just doesn't have the resistance that you're going to need to really take her on further. There's a few spots on the actual arena that you may find better to stand your ground in, and that is, I guess, some of the biggest tips. Kind of get her to come onto you or keep her against a wall. Don't try running away too often, as that will lead to confusion and you're more likely to run into some of the exploding mines. It can be tough when the gas is there, so that's when you've just got a whole block and hope that she's not going to be doing too many flurry attacks that you've maybe not seen. But I found that especially with my back to the summoning point was a really good spot, as some of the explosive mines couldn't really reach deep inside. And take things slow, it's not a sprint, just be ready to block, perfect block or block always, and heal up. Even when she's so close to dying, don't go all out, just in case she does hit you with that flurry and it could be all over. So what do you get for actually defeating her? Well, you get the Mask of the Moldy Matriarch, the Chester Matriarch and the Greaves recipes. One problem, it's really stingy in terms of the drops that you get. You're going to need to kill her multiple times to craft just one of these. You'll probably also need to defeat her at least twice if you want to get the Blaster of the Moldy Matriarch, which pretty much means you won't ever need another hammer ever again. In fact, you can combine not needing a hammer with any kind of explosives also, as obviously it does the same job. Literally, this will destroy anything that requires a hammer. So any rocks, upgrade rocks, stones, milk molars, these can all be destroyed using this new grenade. It does use up your stamina, so it has got limited use, and it can be a bit unpredictable about exactly where it can bounce. And do be warned, it will do damage to you too. So you might always need to make sure you've got the reduction with the fungal charm equipped, which is obviously not as easy to get, as it's still maybe only 1 or 2% chance of getting from harvesting fungal growths only. You do not get it from killing fungal creatures. The shield solidifier you should find in the brony box if you hadn't realised, in the wasp area. It's in one of the sour rocket containers inside that area. And the fresh trinket is pretty easy to get. It's got a high rate of dropping. So you can see I've got 2 infected chunks, 3 infected fangs and 1 infected venom from killing it. And as you can see, you need a whole ton of them resources to go ahead and craft, as well as pond moss. It's got exactly the same sort of defense and resistance stats as the regular brand new Broodmother set. Each piece is going to give you more stun damage by the explosion, and you reduce their explosive resistance with the Dynamite buff, i.e. the sleek upgrade. Wearing all 3 also gives you a chance to chain your explosions together. The new mutation that you get is called Spore Lord. and it'll give you a random buff that lasts until combat ends. So all in all, maybe a good brand new demolitions class to run with. You do only need the infected venom and infected chunks to craft the blaster of the moldy matriarch, and 25 fungal growth. It costs 50 fungal growth to go ahead and repair the blaster of the moldy matriarch, and 10,000 raw science if you want to duplicate it. The arm pieces are also going to require lots of fungal growth to repair, but also some of the infected chunks, so it's definitely recommended that you upgrade it as fast as possible to level 6 so that you only need glue to repair it in future. Each piece to duplicate costs 6,000 raw science, and again obviously each upgrade costs another additional 100. The infected Broodmother trinket that you've got a chance of getting, killing it or stealing it, is most effective when using Mum's Genes or Monstrous Stranger. That's because when it's summoned, they've got a chance of doing explosive damage when in combat. It's a pretty devastating effect on top of all the other damage and effects it does, that extra chance of doing explosion damage. There is of course a stuffed version of the infected Broodmother, and it may be well worth actually going ahead and crafting this using the parts that you've got from the first couple of times, so that you can increase how much loot you get from it going forward, or go ahead and craft the infected Broodmother mount to get maximum damage against her and again make the fight a little bit easier. This is particularly recommended as apparently it's doing much higher damage at the moment, although I'm sure that might get balanced in future. You do get some nice other pieces too, including this brand new infected throne and a brand new brazier, which all contribute quite a lot to your coziness. All in all, this boss fight is super tough to do, as it should be. It's designed for pro players, the players that have stuck around and put hundreds, maybe even thousands of hours in Grounded. The guys that obviously have gone through on woe mode and have done the one challenge where you punch everything to death. Or have laughed and found so many of the boss fights previously too easy. Reportedly, Andy, the designer of this boss fight, was given free license to make it as hard as possible. So it's okay that you are not necessarily going to be able to do this without a good amount of luck and a good amount of practice. It's locked behind so many of the other key features of the completion of the game for a good reason. For me, absolutely, it's worth getting the moldy little bomb here, as I think that's a great thing to have, that you can get rid of having to carry explosives or having a hammer. Although it would be nice if it did do maybe sticky damage or stuck to things when you threw it, rather than unpredictability of it bouncing around. And the arm pieces themselves, well, they can lead to, like I said, a demolition kind of class run, but again, it's not something absolutely needed, and at this point with completion and everything else, it's just going to keep fans busy getting all of these pieces. So there we go. Let me know what you think about obviously the brand new infected Broodmother fight. Is there anything I might have missed? Give me your top tips for builds that you're going to be attempting it with. As always, the home of grounded news, guides and gameplay. I'll see you right back some more very soon.